Hi, thanks for joining us today. Today we're joined with Andrew Carothers, Digital Customer Experience Leader at Cisco. He's the author of The Publicity Handbook and a four-time International Customer Experience Award winner. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ben. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm loving the weather today. It's 75 degrees here in Connecticut. Couldn't have hoped for a better last day of July. It's really great. I've talked a little bit about your accolades and what you do, but tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and the path you had to becoming a CX executive.
Sure. Well, like a lot of folks in CX, I didn't start off my career in CX. I came to it. So in my case, you'll find a lot of people in CX who come from either marketing or maybe customer support. In some cases, you get folks coming from engineering into it as well. In my case, I started my career in marketing. I started off in PR, which is when I wrote the book, The Publicity Handbook that you mentioned, moved into more broader marketing, communications, sort of writ large with investor relations. And I was working in a marketing related role when I joined Cisco 16 years ago. And it was while I was in that role that Cisco started its shift from purely a hardware company to moving to more of a subscription business. Right now, we're about 50% of our revenue comes from subscription. So once we started to make that shift, we knew that we needed to build a CX function. So I was one of the, for lack of a better term, pioneers, right? The folks who take the arrows. There were 50 of us who started the CX function, 100 really, but 50 of us started, and then there was another 50 that were renewal managers that when we started CX on Monday, they were doing the same thing that they've been doing the previous Friday when in the sales organization. So that was the 100 people out of 60,000 employees that started CX at Cisco. And then over the past dozen or so years now that it's been, we've built out to, we're one of the largest functions within Cisco at this point.
Wow.
So it was, sort of a natural progression of focusing, right? If you're a marketer, you're focusing in on the customer and how are you going to reach the customer. And CX is obviously a related function to that.
Yeah, I find I'm a marketer, and I find a lot of marketing departments are doing CX without even knowing it, right? It's just kind of ingrained in our philosophy of what we do. On that note about how you started it, what advice would you have for somebody the first 100 days as a CX executive?
So if you come into an organization or you're building a CX function within an existing organization where you're already working, I think for that first 100-day sprint, I think I would focus in on three things really. One, I would focus in on identifying what data do you have in your organization overall. Trying to identify all the different data sources. The larger organization it is, the more complicated this can be. At Cisco, when we started this process, it took us 3 years to find all of the data sources and get access to all the data sources.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huge company. So there's a lot of the major sources we knew, but then there are little pockets of things that are valuable. But when you're trying to build an overall connected customer experience, you've got to have all the data sources. And so number one, I would identify the data sources that you have available and get access to them and start to bring those into a data lake so that you can start to orchestrate across all the different data sources. Number two, I would start, if you don't already, I would start to really put together a program to understand who are your customers and what sort of personas can you develop based on your customer base. So in the first 100 days, this would mean talking to your frontline folks within your company, salespeople, marketing people, support people. I would put together a customer advisory board, and I have two different types. I would have a sort of a more senior business-focused group of executives and maybe meet once a quarter, once every 6 months. And I would have a group of users, if that doesn't already exist in your company, right? So get the folks who are actually using what you're selling, the product or the service that you're selling, and speak with them more frequently so that you can really start to understand how they operate, what their needs are, and what their friction points are. So like data and customer information, those are the first two things I'd start off in the first 100 days.
Awesome. I think that's really, really good advice. Now you're past your 100 days, right? You've been there a long time. So 2023, 2024, what's your current strategy and what's your future strategy?
Yep. So writ large, the strategy is to develop a connected, personalized, low friction experience for our customers. And that's a long-term journey for any organization, especially a large legacy company like Cisco. So practically what that means is how we're executing is still working to bring in different parts of the Cisco organization, different business units into the broader CX approach that we have, as opposed to doing their own things. Sometimes when we acquire a company, we let them run, and they might handle CX a different way. They might have their data in a different location. We need to, so we're still working to bring some of those companies into the broader fold, because from our customers' perspective, our customers tend to have multiple Cisco products. Not uncommon for them to have 10, 12 different products across business units. It's security, it's collaboration, it's networking. So we need to make sure that we've got everybody, rowing in the same direction when it comes to providing that experience. So that's one particularly practical element that is part of our strategy. Now we execute upon that. The second part that's critical to us also is making it easier to do business with us. I mean, literally making it easier to pay us money. So moving into more frictionless renewals, for example, moving into headless commerce as an example, ways that we can make it easy for customers to understand, to find what they're looking to purchase, or to understand if they've got a renewal coming up, if they've already purchased something, and to very quickly understand the value that they've gotten from that purchase or will get from that, and how to then move through the buying process or the renewal buying process.
So most of your renewals, when this happens, is it automatic, or do you need approval annually? Because that can be a tough dance to have. You got to get a hold of them, make sure they see it and sign it, because it's not a priority if it's just flowing correctly.
But most of us are, most of those renewals contracts are annually recurring.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. And in fact, we did research for years talking to customers and learned that the number one reason why our renewal rates were low, this is going back maybe a decade ago, and everybody was running around, right? Is our pricing off? Is the packaging off? Are we not promoting it properly? And number one reason was customers said, I didn't even know I had a renewal.
Yeah.
And so again, large customers in particular might have thousands of individual renewal contracts. They're not all co-termed. So things would just slip through the cracks. So
absolutely.
We actually started a program to help us reach out to customers with our partners, because Cisco is a partner-led business. I think 90% plus of our revenue comes through partners. So we had to figure out, how do we jointly communicate with customers with our partners? And then first thing we went out the door with, the first use case was simply renewals. And that was a huge effort. And to be able to do that in an orchestrated, automated way, because we're dealing with millions of customers in over 100 countries, multiple languages. So we had to build automation into that process so that we could reach all of these customers.
Oh, that's amazing. What's the balance you have between digital and human-driven customer experience? Because I'm sure it's different, right?
Yeah, great question, Ben. And that program that I mentioned, that platform that we built out that I was just talking about, going to customers with partners, is digital. And so what we've seen over the last 10 years is that all customers are digital. It used to be that a lot of companies, including Cisco, we used to look at a pyramid of customers and say, well, the customers at the top, our biggest customers, that's all human-led. And then you've got kind of the mushy middle, where, sort of a hybrid, when I say human, I'm talking more like CSM, type of approach. And then you've got kind of the mushy middle hybrid. And then at the bottom, you've got your digital-only customers, right? These are the sort of like shavings make a pile. So let's make sure that we're addressing those shavings type of approach. What we've seen over the past 10 years, or I should say accelerated by the pandemic, is that every customer is digital. Even our largest customers at Cisco, with large, complicated purchases and expensive purchases, want a digital-first approach. I think there was a Gartner study that showed 75% of B2B customers want a digital-first approach with the opportunity to speak to a human if they get stuck. And so then so every customer is digital, 100% digital, with humans as well. So that's where the balance comes in, is understanding the approach that customers want. And so when I say digital, I mean everything from sort of plain old email service, but also that means social media connection. That means a big one is community, the Cisco community, right? User community, and being able to tie all that together, customer support, all that, being able to tie in all that, because customers want to be able to research what they're looking for, troubleshoot, move through their adoption phases and get different information, whether that be in the form of a user guide or a step-by-step instruction guide, videos, whatever it might be. They want to be able to do that at 3 in the morning when they can't sleep, or at noon when they're having lunch and they're holding their child, whatever it might be, So we got to give them the digital opportunity on their terms, when they want it, through the channel they want, in the method they want, again, video, written, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of digital.
Yeah, I agree. I know I'm the type of person who's like, I don't want to talk to anybody until I can't figure it out myself, right? I just want to get in there, find an article, and just go, right? I don't want to be delayed and slowed down by having to wait on customer service or a chat, So I think that's really great. And digital first, that's definitely where the world is going.
Well, and to your point, that's the way the world is going. So, it's not just for small, simple, purchasing a book on Amazon or something like that type of purchase anymore. People are buying, homes digitally and getting mortgages digital, as opposed to working with a traditional, loan agent. So people are used to, in their personal life, digital research, digital commerce. For everything from small to large, complex, expensive purchases. It's no different when they walk through the door into their office. Oftentimes, it simply means moving from the kitchen to their home office these days.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They expect the same experience that they have in their personal life.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm glad you guys are pioneering that. With all of this being digital, right? You have all these data points. So how do you measure success?
So we measure success through a variety of different approaches. We have operational metrics. We have business-focused metrics. Our operational ones are everything from unique visitors and overall visitors to the different digital channels that we have, level of engagement. We measure activity as well, which is a key one, right? So first one, are we engaging people? And so I mentioned a couple of the metrics we have there. Second one is, what impact is that having on our customers' behavior? So now we're looking at metrics around speed of adoption. How many of our customers are moving? Like, we've identified what the different adoption stages are for each of our products, and how quickly are we moving those customers through the different adoption levels so that they're getting to a point where they're seeing value. So we measure all of that for each different product, et cetera. So are we influencing customer behavior? And then the third sort of bucket of the 3 types of metrics is, and what business impact is that having? So now we're looking at things like renewal rates and comparing that to adoption rates and speed of adoption, and comparing that back to levels of engagement. It's almost like a traditional marketing funnel, but now we're looking at what are the business impacts there? We're looking at what's the impact on our customer support. So this is a cost avoidance type of metric that we're looking at. So we're looking at a variety of metrics, and that having that level or that sort of panoply of metrics helps us do a couple of things. First, it helps us optimize our own practice. So measure what you do, and you'll act on what you measure. So we measure, I just mentioned a few things. We've got probably 12 to 15 different dashboards that we're looking at overall. So we can measure every part of our business operationally so that we know where to optimize. And then secondly, when we're working with our business stakeholders, whether that be in the BUs or whether that be stakeholders in the executive suite, we're talking to them more about business metrics. How is an investment that we want them to make in what we're doing, how is that going to have an impact on their business? Or if we're trying to bring one of those business units that I referenced earlier that is sort of doing their own thing in their own way because they're an acquisition that we brought on a year or 2 ago, how do we convince them to give up their way and join sort of the broader Cisco way? It's by showing them the business impact that we've had on other business units who take the same step. So that's how we use these metrics.
That's the proof is in the pudding. You mentioned earlier you do customer advisory boards. I'm sure. Do you guys do stop churn? Seemed like a big problem, right? Retention. Did you guys do like retention interviews, churn interviews, win-loss interviews, surveys? Do you guys use all sorts of these other types of tools to gather data points that maybe not the product metrics give you?
Yeah, we're looking at everything from digital breadcrumbs, where customers are going in all the different digital channels, and sort of tying that in. We're sending out surveys, we're doing focus groups, we do a lot of one-on-one work with customers, and we do everything that we do when it comes to figuring out what our strategy should be, and in particular, our execution elements. So the customer journeys, the digital sides of that we put together, all the journey mapping, all of that comes from conversations that we have with customers, intentional conversations to understand their pain points, mapping that out and understanding their moments that matter, not the moments that we assume matter.
Yes.
So it's all very customer focused, and then making sure that we are sharing that information in a closed loop process internal to Cisco with the other teams that need to hear that: engineering, sales, marketing, BU leadership, etc.
That's one of my next questions is, how do you establish these partnerships and gain buy-in with like the C-suite and everybody? Let's elaborate more on what you were just saying.
Yeah. So two parts to that. When we started and we were sort of an immature function within Cisco a dozen years ago, to be fair, the discipline of CX was relatively new too. We spent a lot of time simply evangelizing about what is experience and the discipline of experience and why it's important for a recurring revenue type of business. Now, the industry is more mature, the discipline is more mature, we're more mature within Cisco. So now we spend a lot of time using the data that we have, helping and similar to what we do with customers, where we're taking the customer feedback all along the way of our development process, our journey development. We also work closely with the different stakeholders that we have within Cisco, and we co-develop with them because they've got a lot of knowledge that we don't, whether that be about their product, if they're in a BU, or the process, if they're in engineering, whatever it might be. So we want to make sure that we are bringing that knowledge into the process. We want to make sure that we're bringing those stakeholders into the process so that they have more buy-in themselves and will help evangelize the process. So it's a combination of getting their knowledge and their buy-in and starting off with jointly identifying what's the problem. Either what's the problem that we know customers are complaining about, or if their metrics, if their own business metrics that they care about within their own business unit aren't where they should be or aren't where they might be relative to other BUs. That's how we can identify a problem that we both care about and start working on it together.
That's awesome. Oh, that's a great answer. So those are all things that go great and seem to be swimmingly and everything's running fine, but it couldn't always be like that. What pain points do you have, when you're doing all this grand enterprise customer experience work?
Yeah. Well, our largest pain point is probably a pain point that all organizations have, but particularly large organizations have. We are a large, complex, sometimes siloed company. So our biggest pain point is connecting across those silos where everyone's, doing their own thing, measured and compensated on their own thing. So to get people to look up sometimes and to join, to build a coalition of the committed, that can be the challenge. And that goes to what we were talking about before, is convincing people why it's in their best interest to put resources, whether that be time or budget, whatever it might be, into this joint effort to solve a mutual problem. We're focused on the holistic customer experience and partner experience. They might be focusing on just their own piece of the pie, but it's a win-win for both of us as we're trying to improve what we're doing with customers.
Exactly, right? Rising tide lifts all boats. You guys are a team. We should work together on that. Do you have a specific example of when you've utilized customer feedback to improve your company?
Oh, I've got all day of those, sure. One example I mentioned before is simply on the letting customers know when they have a renewal. Exactly. And right, so that's one right off the bat. Another one is we found from customer feedback that when we would work with customers within our security business. A lot of our security business is a combination of homegrown products as well as products that we've acquired. So security for everything from email to website to Duo, dual factor authentication. We have about 9 or 10 different products in our security portfolio. Each one was operating in its own way, doing its own thing. It was the customers that came to us and said, hold on a second. This is like doing business with 10 different companies. And these are all security products from Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
You need to stop. So we put together an enterprise agreement for customers that they've been asking about for years, for the suite.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got the suite, once they purchased the suite, they immediately got 10 different emails directing them to 10 different getting started websites. It was a mess. So it was the customers, but nobody knew that was going on because everybody was just focusing on their own part.
Yeah.
It was the customers that came to us and said, "Stop! Like you're killing me. Stop! This is like I'm working with 10 different companies, and if I wanted that, I'd go off to work with 10 different companies. That's not why I'm working with Cisco."
Mm-hmm.
So it was that feedback that brought it to our attention and then allowed us to work with those 10 different teams within the security BU to then build out one consistent security approach for our customers, which is complex. I don't want to make it sound simple. That's hard to do. 10 different data sources, 10 different teams, 10 different needs. Not every customer is using all 10 of those products. So how do you personalize the information that's going to each customer based on what she bought or where she is in her adoption journey all the way through to renewal? It's complex.
Yeah.
But that's what customers expect, and that's what we were able to do in response to customer pointing that out.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great example. So on that, what do you think is the future of CX? You've been talking about this automation and digitalize, but what do you see? Get up on your soapbox and tell me where we're going to be 5, 10, 15 years.
We're going to be, here's where I think we're going to be. So I think, I actually just wrote an article about this. I think that CX has hit its teenage phase. So it is grown from, birthed from a combination, as I mentioned before, marketing and customer support, et cetera. Now it's its own discipline, but it doesn't quite know who it is yet. It's still trying to figure that out. Where do I sit? Am I a distinct function that reports to the executive level? Do I sit in marketing, maybe engineering, maybe customer support? I've seen it all over the place. Am I customer success? Am I customer experience? Is there a difference between those two terms?
Exactly.
Who am I? I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll know who we are as a discipline. And I think we will report in most cases to the C-level, because the data already shows that's where when CX reports to the C-level as opposed to into another function, that's where companies get the most bang for the buck. They get the highest renewal rates, they get the highest sales, et cetera. So I think that is where we're going to report to. I think we will probably be called customer experience versus customer success, which I think will be more focused in on the adoption specific portion of it, whereas customer experience will be everything. And I think that there will be there will be even more books about it than there are now, right? We'll be fully fledgling on our own young adults at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. They're even giving out degrees in it now. I know I'm interviewing somebody from Michigan State soon that does a master's program on customer experience. You would never heard of that, 15 years ago. It's already growing.
I say I started off my career in public relations.
Yeah.
And public relations, like a lot of careers, disciplines started the same way. It started off years ago with former journalists who decided they wanted to do something different, and started, flipped to the corporate side. And then started pitching their fellow journalists. And then it just sort of developed there, and then ultimately became its own field with its own professional association and magazines and consulting, agencies and degrees, et cetera. So very similar to that, I think.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Oh, well, this has been an awesome conversation. I don't want to hold you too long. So before I let you go, why don't you just tell us anything else we should know about you? How can we follow your career and stay connected?
Yeah, so best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, Andrew Carothers. And would love to reach out to anybody at all stages in your career. Please feel free to connect with me. I'm happy to talk about CX. I'm passionate about it. I think it's required as a business function. So happy to talk about it. And not surprisingly from this conversation, I think digital is the sweet spot in the center of the bullseye. So if you're interested in anything and all things digital, reach out to me. Be happy to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Ben. Great talking with you.